In this video, I want to talk about a couple of lies, a couple of misconceptions that I used to believe about fluorocarbon fishing line. As many of you guys may know, over a year ago, I actually tested out 29 different fluorocarbon fishing lines to try to find the best one out there on the market. And while I was doing all these tests, I learned a lot about fluorocarbon. And in this video, I just want to show, that's why I have my computer out. I want to kind of share a couple of the high notes of all the testing that I did and just some things that I learned about fluorocarbon. Now, before I get into the video, speaking of fluorocarbon, right now over at Omnia Fishing, if you buy any P-Line tactical fluorocarbon, you can get the second spool for free. It's a buy one, get one special. I think they're running it for just the month of April. So if you guys want to stock up on some fishing line, it's definitely a good time to do so. I will leave a link down below in the description. When it comes to P-Line, it actually tested in my test as the 5th most supple line, meaning that it didn't have a lot of memory in the line, which means it's really easy to work with. So it's a good line. I'm gonna leave a link down below in the description for it. All right, let's talk about fluorocarbon lines in general. Now, I'm not gonna tell you in this video what the best fluorocarbon was. I will leave a link for that video either down below or at the end of this video. But a few big things that I learned about fluorocarbon in general is one, fluorocarbon stretches more than we think. And it actually stretches pretty similarly to monofilament. When you look at a lot of monofilament lines, you're talking about line that will stretch upwards of 30 to 35%, which is a lot of stretch. I mean, you think about a 100-foot long cast out there, how much 30% stretch can actually cause that line, to stretch. So anyways, that's a lot of stretch. Now, when I tested out all the fluorocarbon line, I found that probably the medium or the mean when it came to fluorocarbon and how much it stretched was somewhere probably around 23, 24%. And there was actually, I have my computer up here, there was 3 different lines that stretched over 32%. So although this is fluorocarbon line, it still has a good amount of stretch in it. Probably not quite as much as monofilament, but still a decent amount. So that's just something that I always thought, back in the day, like, oh man, it has way less stretch than fluorocarbon. It's basically like using braid. I remember thinking that back in the day, but after seeing the results of this, it has a good amount of stretch to it. Now, with that being said, something that is very, very important to know is that depending on what brand you buy, there's going to be a lot less stress, a lot less stretch or more stretch in those particular brands. And it varies a lot. Like I said, I actually had one particular fluorocarbon fishing line that stretched by 33%. On the flip side, I actually tested out Daiwa's fluorocarbon leader line, and it stretched 12%. So that is a huge difference. That's a difference of 21%. So that's something that's really, really important because depending on what style of fishing you are doing, you actually may want a little stretch in your line. You actually may want less stress in your line. For example, if you are flipping and pitching, especially close quarter fishing, I think it's okay to have a little bit more stretch in your line that stretches 25, 30%, because if you set the hook and that fish is 15, 20 feet away from you, you kind of want something to absorb a little bit of the impact of you setting the hook so close to that fish. And so having a little bit more stretch is not only good when it comes to not breaking off, but it also helps you when it comes to bigger, like when you're fishing a bait in a lot of cover. Having a little bit more stretch, if you're bringing that over wood, that stretch just kind of helps you to get that fish out without it kind of being such a brittle line that will break really easily. Now, on the flip side of things, if I'm finesse fishing and I'm fishing, a drop shot, for example, I kind of tend to like lines that have less stretch in them because the less stretch is going to be a lot more sensitive. So especially if I'm fishing a braid to fluorocarbon leader and I have a leader line that has, for example, like that Daiwa line that has 12% stretch, I'm going to get a very good feel of everything down there on the bottom, and including bite detection. So it's very, very important to take in consideration that a lot of these lines are going to stretch differently out there. Now, you may be sitting there saying, okay, Tyler, like what are the lines that stretch, you know, a lot less? And I'm not going to go through all that in this video because again, I went through it in my testing video. And so I will leave that linked at the end of this video if you guys want to watch it. I put a list together so you can see exactly which lines are the best when it comes to stretch. Now, another thing that I wanted to talk about is the number that is on the package, the pound test. This is another big kind of misconception out there because some anglers may think, man, I've never broke this particular type of line. It is by far better than line A or line B, right? And that's not necessarily truth because like the variance in our stretching, there's also a huge variance in the actual pound test that it takes to break a line, even though a lot of these lines are labeled a certain pound test breaking strength. For example, I tested out 20-pound fluorocarbon line in that big test. And I had lines that broke anywhere from right around 20 all the way to 28 pounds. As a matter of fact, Strike King, their particular fluorocarbon, was the one that had the highest breaking strength. But it broke at like 28, I think 28.7. So that line, it would be very difficult to break. And so some anglers may be like, this line is the absolute best, but you're almost fishing with 30-pound test. I mean, that's definitely more in the 25-pound category. So that is just things to keep into consideration when you're out there fishing. Just because you haven't broke that line all the time doesn't necessarily mean it is better than another line. It just might mean that the actual breaking strength is higher. And a lot of times with a higher breaking strength, you're also going to have a bigger leader, or sorry, you're going to have a larger in diameter fluorocarbon. And a larger in diameter fluorocarbon tends to be a little bit harder to work with as well. So there's just a number of variables when it comes to a fluorocarbon line that I think are really important to understand when you're out there fishing. Now, with that being said, all of these lines are vastly different, but when I test out lines, I'm testing them to their max. Like, I think that that's really, really important to take in consideration. I am trying to get them to the fail point. If I am using 20-pound line though, I have very rarely broke 20-pound line. So can you get away with fishing a lot of different brands in 20-pound line and never have issues with it? 100%. 100%. Okay, and I think that it's really important to know that when I did all these tests, I kind of came up with which one was the best, but in the middle, these lines were so close together. Like the point spread on them were very, very close. So a lot of these lines are very similar. There's just these few little nuances that are a little bit different that are important sometimes when it comes to fishing. Now, I like to not complicate fishing, and I feel like me just talking about this has complicated it. So I don't want to overcomplicate fishing. Can you just go out and buy a line from Walmart and go and catch fish 100%? I mean, I know a guy who's a very good bass angler. He still uses Berkley big game line a lot, which is like it's a good line, but it's a monofilament line. It has a lot of stretch. It's not nearly as sensitive as a lot of our fluorocarbons. Dude still catches a ton of fish. So guys, I do want to leave you with that. Now, if you guys want to take advantage of the Omnia deal, don't forget to click down below. And if you want to watch the video where I tested all the fluorocarbons, I will leave it linked right here. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I will see you tomorrow.